Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères du Royaume du Maroc, qui venait de vous exprimer au nom de
Monsieur Minister of Foreign Affairs of Morocco, who have just spoken in the name of His Majesty. We thank you for this most encouraging and substantive speech you have just given us. Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, it is a great honor for us to have you at this conference, and we will be hearing from you in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I am extremely proud and happy to be able to open this third edition of the World Policy Conference in the presence of such eminent personalities. Allow me to remind you of the great ambition of this process. The Minister, in the message from His Majesty, has reminded us that our ambition is indeed to participate actively to the reform of a governance, of a world governance system that would shore up the security of the planet for the coming decades. Because the issue of governance is first of all an issue of security. That is, finding coordination mechanisms and working methods in all areas that would allow us to resolve as harmoniously as possible all types of conflicts that might arise, whether they be political or insecurity or in economics, and have dimensions that had been so far unknown to humanity, as is the case with climatic issues. In an interdependent world, because globalization is in fact simply a reinforcement and a qualitative change in interdependency, in such a world, the great danger, the great risk is that an accident occurring anywhere have an impact and cause a global disaster. So an active thinking on world governance is a necessity. And the objective of this conference, at its third edition now, but with firm intention to continue in the future, is to bring together personalities who are actors in international policy, and all the other stakeholders, eminently Anglo-Saxon term, and all the stakeholders in the political, social and economic spheres, without whom nothing would be possible. We want, through this edition, bring our contribution to this immense task. A positive contribution, I may add, because it is only too easy to criticize, to say everything that is going wrong. But we want to say also what we are expecting from you. We would like to hear positive contributions, suggestions as to how things may be improved. Another thing I would like to say, after having reminded us of the objectives of the conference, is that if I were a humanitarian doctor, if I had to give you a diagnostic of the state of the planet, honestly, I wouldn't be giving you a very optimistic prognosis today. Not a terribly pessimistic prognosis either, but there are reasons for concerns. Today, with Jean-Claude Trichet and many other very eminent personalities from Asia and from the planet as a whole, coming from the economic spheres, we will see that, yes, we have avoided the worst so far after the crisis of 2007-2008. We avoided reaching the depth of the abysm, as happened in the 30s, and I would like to salute the work done by the central banks in that particular crisis of 2008-2009. They have done a really fantastic job And Jean-Claude Trichet, who was here with us today, was a participant in the first World Policy Conference at the beginning of October, just after the Lehman Brothers disaster. So efforts were done, continue to be done. But we also see signs of hesitation. I am very worried about the inflationist temptation. For example, as we see in the United States with the Federal Reserve, I am also worried to see a resurgence of the most simplistic version of the Keynesian model, supported by many economists who would have us spend, and increase public deficits that are already so great in countries such as the United States. In other words, there are causes for concern, not alarm, but concern. And in the financial area, also important progress has been made, but there is still much to do. And we will work on that today. But we are talking here also about global issues, and I must also evoke the conflictual areas in the on the planet. I'm looking at the next few years, at the next decades. There is, of course, the Middle East, going from the Near East and all the way to Afghanistan and Pakistan. And there we see two conflicts that still have not been resolved, but that show no signs of improvement. There is the Israel-Palestine issue on the one hand, and the problem of Kashmir on the other hand. The two must be seen together, because you cannot make a good analysis of the Afghan problem if you don't take into account the rivalry between Pakistan and India. So on both extremes of this very vast Middle East, you have two conflicts that could explode at any moment and that have an impact on the region as a whole. There is certainly cause for concern. At the other extremity of the Eurasian continent, there is the potential instability of East Asia in the Korean Peninsula, for example. And I would like to remind you of the recent incidents in the South China Sea between Japan and China. They show that at any moment we may be faced with situations that could go out of control. There are, of course, mechanisms to stop this sort of situation, but at times compensation mechanisms simply do not work. So this shows the importance of relations between economics and politics. One last item before I give the floor to Mr. Ban Ki-moon. In the existing processes, which are mostly empirical, and it is fine that they are, regarding a new world order, a new world governance, these are two ways of expressing the same idea in reality. There are new mechanisms, the G20, which is the heir of the Ministers of Finance group, which is now a group of heads of states and governments. There is also the G8, although we might wonder if there is any reason to maintain it alive. And then there is, of course, the Organization of the United Nations and its system. in spite of its weaknesses, its failings, its maybe out-of-dated composition, such as in the Security Council and its composition. This UN system, nevertheless, is the only one to be representative of legitimacy at the international level. And yet this UN system is constantly reforming itself. So how could we suggest an improvement of the system and at the same time make it more compatible, more coherent with these other new institutions such as the G20 or with the existing G8? Those are a few of the questions we ask ourselves. And after having looked at this question, what could I do better than to give the floor to Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, who has given us this immense honor and privilege of coming here, spend a few hours with us in Marrakesh today for the opening of our conference. Mr. Secretary General, my most sincere thanks. You have a great reputation. We are happy to have you here, and I now give you the floor, sir.